Hello and welcome to this technical webinar about how to easily create and maintain complex style sheets. My name is Mikkel Ricky and I'm a developer evangelist here at Dynamicweb, and I will give a short presentation of how to write and maintain cascading style sheets in 2012. And on the agenda we have, first I'll give a short introduction and tell a little bit about why I'm giving this presentation. And then I'll venture into the dangerous territory of giving a live demo and another live demo, and then we'll finish off with some questions if you have any. And I have a disclaimer. I have to tell you that I'm not a graphical designer, so in a few minutes you'll see some web pages that are not very pretty to look at, but they serve to illustrate the purpose of this talk. I hope you'll bear with me. So the reason for this presentation is that writing cascading style sheets is really quite a chore. We have to write a lot and it's hard to maintain and stuff like that. For instance, I have an example here where we are repeating ourselves a lot. I have to write the article element 3 times, and I have to write the color red 2 times. And actually I have the color red in this style sheet 3 times, but the designer has asked for the article to have a border on the right that is red, and the same red color should be used for the H1 element. And that means that the alert message border color is another red semantically. So when writing even slightly non-trivial CSS, it's tedious and error prone. If the designer asks us to change the color of the article border and the header, then we have to find all occurrences of the red, or some of the reds at least, to change them to blue or something. And at some point we might resort to using find and replace for getting the red colors changed into blue colors, but then we will probably change some reds that shouldn't be changed. So we have to find a way to solve this. And something called Sass comes to the rescue. And Sass is actually a system that's been around for a couple of years, and there are 2 syntaxes to Sass. And the one I'll be looking at today is the one called SCSS. I'll just call it Sass. And it's a superset of CSS, which means that any valid CSS document is also a valid SCSS document. And that makes it very easy to get started with using Sass, because you can just write CSS, and then as you move along you can start using some of the cool stuff that Sass provides on top of CSS. And Sass makes it a lot easier to write style sheets and maintain them. And what actually happens is that when you have written a Sass document, you compile it into a regular CSS document that any browser can read. And given the fact that Sass is a superset of CSS, the recipe for starting using Sass is actually quite simple. The first thing you do is you rename your files from .css to .scss. Then you compile the Sass files into CSS. Then you start cleaning up your style sheet. You stop repeating yourself. You start to reuse styling and use a lot of the other cool stuff that Sass provides. And then you return to step 2 and compile again and test and clean up and improve your styling. And now I'll give you a short introduction to using Sass in the real world. So what we have here on the screen now is I'm using the command prompt today to demonstrate how to use Sass. And I prefer to use the command prompt or the terminal on my Mac, but there are a lot of tools out there that you can use to use Sass without having to use the command prompt. You can get buttons to click on if you prefer that, but for demonstration purposes I prefer to use the command prompt so it's clear what's going on. And at the top left I have the my terminal that I will be using for compiling my Sass documents into SCSS documents. On the bottom left, I have the editor for editing my style sheets. On the top right, I have a preview of how the generated style, which means the CSS styling, actually looks. And on the bottom right, I have a browser showing the result of the styling. I'll just show you here in the top left what files I have. For backup purposes, I've made a copy of the style CSS. That's my main CSS file, and called it styles.original.css just to have that in case something goes wrong. Then I have a main HTML file, and it's a Dynamicweb template file, but it could be any HTML file. And down here on the bottom right, we can see the result of that. So I'll just show you the style sheet. It's like this. It's very simple, but still shows some of the challenges we're facing when writing CSS. And this CSS file could be written in a more clever way, but for this purpose, it's great. So what I'll do is, I told you to start using Sass, I have to rename my file to SCSS. So just move the styles CSS file and call it styles SCSS. And it's the same content. And now I can use my Sass command to compile this style sheet into an SCSS file. I do this simply by writing SCSS and then the style sheet file, the Sass file, and press enter. And then Sass converts the SCSS file into a CSS file. And as a default, it just prints it on the terminal. But of course, I wanted to write the content to a file, and I can do that by writing stuff like this. Then it will put the output from the compiled SCSS into the actual CSS file. And on the top right, you can see the actual output now. And also something that's really cool about Sass is that you can get compress your style sheet if you want that. You might prefer that in a production environment. Then just write like this. Then you can see on the top right that now we have a compressed style sheet. But for now, we'll just stick with the uncompressed styling so we can follow what's going on. Down here in my editor, I'll now open my SCSS file and start to resolving some of the issues we have when writing CSS. For instance, I mentioned that we have the article element mentioned 3 times in this document, and that's not very good, because if in a more complex style sheet, we have the same element mentioned a lot of times, and typically we have some wrapper around the content, and then we have to mention the content, the ID of the content element a lot of times. So one of the first things I'll do is to get rid of the 2 articles mentioned, and I can do that in Sass by nesting my selectors. So just delete article and then add a closing bracket. When I save this, so this means that we're styling the article element with the border right, and any H1 element inside an article should have the red color, and the P element inside the article has a margin. Now I'll save this, and then I recompile my style sheet on the top left, and we can see the output on the top right is actually the same as we had before. Sass has expanded the nested notation on the bottom left into something that's actually real CSS. And I can move along, and I can do the same thing with nesting, with the messages, the alert message and the warning message. But here I have to be careful. If I just do it like this and compile the style sheet, you see that this is not what we meant to do. Now we're styling elements with a class of warning inside the message class. So we have to make sure that we're actually styling the message classes, the elements with both the message class and the warning class. And the way to do that in Sass is to add an ampersand in front of the sub-selectors inside the main selector. And then we compile again, and we see the style sheet updates. Actually, sorry. Now it's updated, and we see the browser show the correct output. So that's nesting in Sass. And something that's sorry about that. Now we see I've compiled my style sheet manually a couple of times, and I don't want to do that. So I'll just tell my Sass command to watch the styles. And now it starts to listen to any changes in the Sass file, and whenever the Sass file changes, it will automatically create this SCSS file. So now I can go down here, and I have to improve my styling a bit. And the next thing I'll do is to, as I noted earlier, this red and this red is, as requested by the web designer, is the same red. So I have to find some way to reuse that color. And the way to do that in Sass is to define a variable, and I'll call that main color. I set it to red like this. And then down here, I will use that color or the variable like this. And then I save the file, and you notice on the top left that Sass is watching the file and overriding the style.css file, and we can see the output over here, which is the same as before. We have just introduced a variable that we're using, and the browser is the same. And now whenever the designer might say we want it to be blue, then I'll just change the main color to be blue, save the file. We'll get a new style on the top right, and on the bottom right we see that now the border on the article and the color of the header is blue. So that's really nice to work with. And notice that this red is not the main color, because an alert message should probably always be red, whether or not the main color of the layout is blue. But we can take this even further and use more cool Sass stuff. We notice down here that the alert message and the warning message, they are styled in very similar fashions. The only thing that's different is the border color. So I'd like to take these 4 lines and put them somewhere else so I can reuse them until whenever I have a message, I just want it to be styled like that. So what I'll do is I'll cut those 4 lines, and then at the top of my document, I'll create what's called a mix-in. Just call it message box. So just a name I can make myself. Then I put the style into that mix-in. And mix-ins are just templates that I can reuse in my styling below. So now down here, if I change this, you'll notice that the styling of the alert message is completely gone now. And I have to use the mix-in. I'll simply do that by including it down here like this. Then we see we get our styling back. I'll do the same thing down here with the warning message, and now we see that we're using stuff, and if I want to change something, I'll just do it up here. If I want the messages to have a 10 pixel border, say, I'll just change it in one place, and all the uses of the mixin will automatically update. So that's really great and nice to work with. And then we notice that the border color down here, we have a border color here, and we have a border color here. So could we do something about that? Because it's message boxes that should have some border color. And we can do that. We can add parameters, named parameters to our mix-ins. So we could go up to the mix-in and add a parameter called, I'll just call it color, and then give it a default value, say it could be white, for instance. And then I can use that color down here. So I'll add the border border color and set it to the color. Save it. And then down here I can move the actual color up here and save. Then we have that. And down here I'll add yellow like this. So now we're down to one line for styling the message boxes. What about if we wanted to have the border radius to be different on the message boxes? Yeah, we could actually do that. We could just add another parameter called radius, say, and a default value of 1m. We'll use that down here. And then down here we can use name parameters to do something. Let's just, for the sake of the example, change the default color of the message box to be blue. And then we want the warning message to have the default color and another radius of 2m, say. Then we can use the name parameter like this. And then the mixin will use the default value for the color and then use the radius value of 2m. And up here we have, and then we can just make it easier for ourselves, because the padding should probably depend on the radius, and say that we want the padding to be half the radius, for instance. Then we can write that. And you notice over here that Sass is computing the right value. And Sass can make a lot of calculations on any values. It can add colors and subtract colors and make colors lighter and darker and everything. So it's really nice. Another nice feature that you can use is that if I introduce deliberately a mistake in my CSS file, Sass will actually add this to the generated style sheet. So if I don't look at the output in my terminal or check the command prompt up here on the top left, I can actually see in the browser that I have a syntax mistake in line 6 of my style sheet. So that makes it pretty easy to find errors and to fix them. Yes, that's a quick introduction to using Sass, where we can reuse code and we can stop repeating ourselves and we can make computations on everything almost, and we can define mixins to reuse code. And I'll just jump back to the browser and now I'll introduce another very cool tool that's called Compass. And Compass is a framework that's built on top of Sass, which means that Compass is using Sass to do some really cool tricks. And Compass is a framework that contains a lot of the best practices we see from around the web, where very skilled CSS coders have made a lot of cool stuff and tricks, and they are collected into Compass, and you can use them, and you can actually write your own new extensions to Compass that is easy to use, and you can build up your own library of Compass extensions that you use for all your web development, or you can use some of the best practices from out there. Now I'll try again to make a live demo of using Compass. Sorry. So I'll just stop some of this. I don't need this window now. I'll just close that. I'll make my browser a little bigger. Sorry. Like this. And then what I'll do, as I noticed, we are actually inside the Dynamicweb template designs folder. And we could use Sass for any project, but I'll just pretend to be creating a new Dynamicweb project. So I make a folder called My Design, say. I go in there, and it's empty right now. And I've prepared some files. I'll just copy over. I'll get my main HTML. Sorry. So this is just a Dynamicweb template file. You notice that I'm using the DW navigation stuff to get the content. But for now, I'll just open this plain HTML file in my browser, like this. And then I'd like to start using Compass. And the way to do that is to call the Compass command and tell it to create a new project. And I want to use relative assets, which means that the references to images in my style sheets will be relative rather than absolute. So I always use this. Now we see that Compass, it congratulates us with creating the new project and tells us a little bit about what we can do now and how we compile the style sheets and how we watch it. This is if we want to manually compile the style sheets, for instance, to tell it when we're making the production version, we can explicitly call the compile command and tell it to compress the style sheet. And during development, we can just use the watch command to continuously have Compass updating the style sheets. And there's some resources for further reading. And it tells us how to include the style sheets in our HTML file. I'll just show you the files generated. The config.rb is actually a Ruby file. Sass is using Ruby to perform its magic. So I won't go into details about that right now, but you can check that out yourself. And then we have the Sass folder, and for historic reasons, it's called Sass, and you can change that if you want to, or you can just use the default. I prefer to use the default. And then it has created 3 style sheets inside the Sass folder, one for Internet Explorer, a print style sheet, and a screen style sheet. And it has also generated the CSS files inside the style sheets folder. But for now, I don't want to use those files, so I'll just I'll just clean my project first. Compass clean. Then we see it has removed all the CSS files, and also it has removed the Sass cache directory. And then I'll copy some stuff over from my pre-cooked stuff. I have the Compass. I'll take the Sass folder. I need some include stuff. I'll just come back to that in a short while, like this. And I need my default style sheet. So now I have the default SCSS, sorry, and I have the IE. I don't want that. I'll get rid of that as well. And the print and the screen one. So now we're ready to go. I'll just Compass compile and see what happens. And now we see that Compass has created the style sheet default CSS. I'll refresh my browser and I have this beautiful design that I've created myself. And you can see here quite clearly why I'm not a graphical designer, or why I shouldn't be. So down here in my editor, I'll open up my Sass file and show you some of the stuff that's going on in there. And this is actually a pretty simple style sheet where I have some, you notice at the top I have some 2 variables, the primary background color, that's red, and the primary color, that's the foreground color, sorry. And then I have a lot of imports, and here these imports are importing Compass extensions that can help me to do a lot of stuff. I have the reset extension that basically resets all browser styling, all the built-in browser styling. So I have a clean slate for building my own styling without having to cancel out any padding and stuff like that on elements. Important, the clearfix mixin that some of you probably know. It's a way to make sure that elements handle floats inside in the correct way. And use some images and something for border radius and something for box sizing. And down here I have I'm including some partials. And partials is a convention in the Sass and Compass world where if we look at the top left, you see that I have my default SCSS file. That's my main style sheet. And then inside the include folder, which could be called anything, I'll just call it include to keep things clear. I have a number of SCSS files whose file names start with an underscore. And that's a way to signal to Compass and Sass that these files are partials, i.e. files that shouldn't be compiled into style sheets themselves, but are included by other style sheets. And that's the reason for me only getting the default SCSS file in a style sheets folder when compiling. I'll just start the Compass command and tell it to watch the stuff. And now it's ready to look for changes. And now I can go down here and I can change the color to blue. And Sass is recompiling. I'll refresh my browser, and now the main color is blue. So that's just as we saw before. You notice that I've added the bang default or exclamation mark default after the value of the variable. And that's a way to tell Sass that this variable, the variable primary background color, should be set to the value red if it hasn't been set already. And I'll just show you how that works. Because up here in the top left in my designs folder, inside the Sass folder, I have, like this. I have the default SCSS, but assume that I want to be able to skin my solution, i.e. to easily change the layout, or perhaps let the user change the layout. Then I can do that. So just copy over some style sheets that I preferred from my template folder. I'll get one that's called Spring, put it into the Sass folder, and one called Winter. And down here in my editor, I'll open these. I'll get the Spring one, and I'll get the Winter one. So what we see down here now, we are in the, what that's called, it's the Winter one, I guess. Here we set the primary background color to being AAA, that's some shade of gray, and then we import the default style sheet. And I should mention that when we're using the import, then it will try if it can find a partial or an SCSS file that matches this name, i.e. either a partial called underscore default.scss or a file called default.scss, it will import that and include it in the file. And if it can't do that, it will work as a regular CSS import declaration. So what this does is I declare, set the variable, the primary background color to be in gray, and then I import the default. And given the fact that the default just says if the primary background color hasn't been defined or hasn't been set to a value, then I'll set it to red, otherwise I'll do nothing. Then the effect of this is that when I run my Compass command up here, is that I will get two new style sheets. One called Spring, because I had a new Spring SCSS, and one called Winter SCSS. And we can just take a look at those up here. So we see that this is the Winter style sheet, and somewhere down here, this is all generated by Sass, and it's completely almost impossible to edit this, and we shouldn't be editing this. But it's nice to take a look at it, and you can see that Compass is adding some comments in the SCSS. The CSS file to let us know from where the source code is, so we can go back and fix some potential problems in the SCSS file. I'll just go to my browser and refresh. Now we're back to the main style sheet being reddish. And if I go to my menu in Firefox, I can change to alternate style sheets. I can change to the Spring style sheet, which has some green colors, and we notice that the menu has been moved to the right as well. That's all part of the styling. And we can change to the Winter style sheet. We see we have the gray theme, but most of the styling is the same. Going back to my SCSS code, I'll just open some of the the parsings to let you have a look at those. I have one for page where I have the general layout of the page. You can see I'm defining some variables in the top. One that I can override from outside from something, including this by adding the default, and some that 3 variables that shouldn't be that we cannot override from the outside. Then there's lots of stuff going on down here. I'm styling on the page elements, setting the min height, and I'm including here a compass extension for creating linear gradients. And I'll just open the CSS and we can find this. So these lines where the background is set to some linear gradient using all the browser-specific prefixes, the WebKit, the Mozilla, the Opera, the Microsoft, and the W3C recommendation. All these lines, these 6 lines, are generated automatically by Compass by using this. So that means that Compass takes care of a lot of browser-specific hacks you have to implement in your styling. And the rest of it is just regular Sass, where we're using variables to keep things clear. We're using the box sizing to make it easier to control the sizing of boxes. And we can use if sentences in our styling. So if we want the page to have equal column height, then we can have that. And that's you might have faced the challenge of having a menu, something that's floated to the left, say, to have the same height as the main content area. And there are many hacks for accomplishing this, but I've used the display table cell to make this. So that's why this left side grows to the size of the content. And this is I have, if I ask for them to be of equal height, then they will be that. Otherwise, something else will happen, and I can, if I change to the spring theme, you'll notice that the menu is not growing to the height of the content. So I won't go into great detail about this. You can take a look at that yourself. It's pretty straightforward when you get the basic idea behind Compass. So I'll just go back to my browser here. That was the live demo 2. And I've collected some references here for you. You can check it out yourself, something about Sass. And it's really worth a read. And Compass, and a few articles about what Sass is and how you can use it. The list apart article down here is really great to get started with Sass. And of course, you have to practice to learn how to use this. But as I mentioned, it's really easy to get started because you can just use your CSS files or your CSS documents and rename them, and then start using Sass and add stuff and refactor stuff as you see fit. And whenever you're comfortable with using some of the more advanced stuff in Sass, you can do that. And you can, I'm very old. Of the old schools, I use the command line, and there are some references out there how you can install Sass and run it yourself. And I'll put on my blog, I'll put an article about how you can install it under Windows, so you can get up and running. Or if you prefer some graphical interface, you can try out Scout that runs on Windows and Mac and Linux. You can try the Compass app for running Compass. And if you're on a Mac, you can use CodeKit that can run Compass and Sass and a lot of other cool stuff. And there's also JS Fiddle if you prefer to just stay in your browser. I've created a small fiddle where you can actually write CSS up here. I see that's the example from before. I can change, let's say the border width should be 10 pixels up here, and I can update. then it will run Sass in the background and show the output down here. So JS Fiddle is a really cool stuff for doing stuff like that and showing it to some of your friends. So back to this, yeah. And I'll, as mentioned, I'll put some resources on my blog, and I'll put up the source code for the examples I've run through today, and some other stuff for you to check out if you want to. So that's it for me talking right now. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and ask anything you'd like. Okay, I have a question here from Ernesto asking, what are the differences between Sass and less? And less is a stylesheet language that's basically the same idea as in Sass, and it's a matter of opinion what you prefer to use. But one of the main differences between less and Sass is that in less you cannot have variables with default values, which means that it's a little bit trickier to make different skins. As I demonstrated here, it was really easy to make the winter skin, because I could just set a new value of the main color and then include the default style sheet, and then the background color, the main color from the winter skin, was used in the main styling. So that's one of the main differences. And also, actually, less can be compiled on the fly by the browser. There exists a JavaScript implementation for converting less style sheets into CSS style sheet, which means that you can actually just include less styling into your web page and have the browser render the CSS. And there are a few other differences, but it's a matter of opinion what suits your needs best. And personally, I prefer Sass, but less is cool as well. So I have another question. Are there any plans to integrate this into Dynamicweb? Yes, we plan to start using Sass and Compass for the solution set, and but the question might be another one, actually, if we plan to make it possible to just add Sass files to the in the templates, and then have the system build the CSS styling on the fly. And we've discussed that, and it may, we don't have it, we won't see it in the near future, but it might be cool to have. And in the Rails framework, they're actually using Sass and then compiling it, and of course caching it on the server, so you don't have to manually compile your Sass files. The server will do that for you. Yeah, I see. That's another question, and that's the one I just answered. We have considered making a parser for that will do the Sass conversion on the fly, but we don't have any actual plans for implementing that. But it might come at some point. Okay, then I threw someone off by using the command line way, and I understand that, but I think it's yeah. I'm a bit old school, and I prefer to use the command line because I think it's more obvious what is going on when I write Compass compile and Compass watch and stuff like, rather than just clicking some buttons in a user interface. But I appreciate your feedback, and that's on my blog I'll write something about how you can use other tools for doing this. Yeah, and then there's but I guess it's easy to use an app too and still work online and not locally. I'm not quite sure I understand that question. But depending on how clever the tool you're using, it will probably be able to have local files or files stored on an FTP server or something, and perform some updates in regular intervals. Yes, and that's not a question. That's someone saying awesome, and it is awesome. And I haven't been writing real old school CSS for some years now. I always use Sass because it's a lot easier, and I really like it. So yeah, and that's a question if I will upload the presentation on my blog, and I will, and I will send you an email with the link to the blog and with the slides and the examples. And then we have a question here that Compass is downloaded, right? Or can any editor just use it? Actually, Compass it is a program you have to install locally, but you can, and if you want to just try it out, you can use JS Fiddle or something. And I think on the Sass homepage, there's actually you can try it out yourself. I'll just yeah, there's try online, so you can try it online to get a feeling for it, how it works, and then, but it's also pretty easy to download one of the tools for running Sass. It's you don't have to install anything. You just download the tool and run it. If you use Scout or Compass app, it's Sass and everything is built in, and it just runs out of the box. So I think that's about it. If we don't have any more questions, then I'll. Oh, there's another one. The question is, but the main idea here is to use it locally. Yes, yeah, we cannot use it on the server right now. So in this setup I've demonstrated today, we're actually developing the style sheets locally, and depending on how you prefer to do your development, it's nice to do it locally and test locally, and then you can just generate your CSS styling as part of a build script or something, and then deploy to the server. So right now you have to have access to the actual files, and if they're on the server, you have to maybe web dab access or something like that. But you can write me an email and ask me about this, and then we can discuss it over and see if we should do something to make it easier to use it in Dynamicweb. Yeah, and publishing. Then we should probably publish this as a part of publishing or deploying our templates. Okay, yeah. So if you're always working online, we have to find a way for you to use this. But it's not impossible to do it, but we have to find out how to do it in the best way. So yeah. So great. Any further questions? Okay, then I'll say thank you. I hope you were able to hear me out there, and thank you for taking your time. Bye bye.